I think somebody was right when they were talking about my clicker. I tried to use it to get this video started and nothing happened. Looks like I'm going to either have to get it fixed or get a new one or do without. So, what I want to talk to you about tonight is my grandfather. I think you need to be introduced to the kind of background I come from. They called him Pap. Sometimes my mother would even refer to him as a mean old man. That's mainly because he was a very industrious man. Business, business, business. There was no such thing as play. So, Pap was a blacksmith. He had a grist mill. He ran a general store. And he had one of the biggest gardens in Southwest Virginia and East Tennessee. He provided fruits and vegetables for the market every summer in Middlesboro, Kentucky, which was about 15 miles from the farm. Now I can tell you this about Pap. I only saw him one time, and I remember that day. It was a family reunion. No, I take that back. It was not a family reunion. We had just driven to Middlesboro. He was living with my Uncle Paris and his wife Bertha. Sweet, sweet lady. They had 6 children. Now, Grandpa had sold the farm years before. My grandmother died in 1938. I was just a baby, so I never saw her. He died in 1942, 4 years later. And the thing I remember about him was he had handlebar mustache. You know what I'm talking about. You've watched the barbershop quartets. They always had those big handlebar mustache. That was him. He kept it waxed. And my cousin told me that he sometimes put black shoe polish on it so that it wouldn't turn gray. His hair was thinning on top. He was what I considered from the photographs I've seen. He was a small man. He was always dressed with his vest buttoned down the front and dressed ready to go somewhere. There really wasn't any place to go except to walk downtown. The house that they lived in was on Exeter Street. All the streets were named from English names. And their house was right at the end of the street, or should say dirt road, that's all it was. And a creek ran beside the house, big barn in the back. We were there on Sunday morning, and Mama was in the kitchen with my Aunt Bertha and my Aunt Renee helping cook. Aunt Bertha had brought in chicken from her chicken lot, and they were frying chicken. Of course, the big meal when we all got together was always gravy and biscuit, fried chicken, and usually green bean, that sort of thing. The home style cooking feeds a lot of people. Well, we sat down at the table. They had a dining room with a pretty mantel on one wall, and I was 5 years old. I was sitting next to my mother. It was a big table. I'd never seen one like it before. And what it had that was different was a Lazy Susan. Now you all know what a Lazy Susan is. You probably even have one. but the kind you have is about this big around. It sits in the middle of your dining room table, and you usually got a pretty little bowl or flower arrangement sitting on it for decoration. Pap's Lazy Susan table was a big, round, huge oak table, and in the center was the Lazy Susan. The Lazy Susan was probably this big around, as I recall. It was big to me. The vegetable dishes were brought in one by one, and they were placed on that Lazy Susan. And of course, Pap was the first. He sat at the end of the table in his black wrought iron chair, head of the table, and he started the circle of the Lazy Susan, moved it around. He took a helping of chicken. He moved it one turn. The next thing might be the platter of biscuit. He'd take the biscuit, give it another turn. And each time the Lazy Susan was turned, everybody took a helping from the dish in front of them. So by the time it made a complete circle, everybody had had something from each dish on the Lazy Susan. Well, I was sitting next to my mother, down low, of course, and I was looking up at that Lazy Susan, and that was the strangest thing I'd ever seen. Each time it turned, there was a grinding noise, and I didn't know what that grinding noise was, where it was coming from. What it was, I don't know what you call it, the pedestal, the post, under the table was this big around. It was what held the Lazy Susan on top of the table. And when it turned, the big bolt that went down the center of the post was what was making the grinding noise that turned the Lazy Susan. That to me was the most fascinating thing I'd ever seen. But of course I hadn't seen too many things because I was only 5 years old. Pap built that table. He was what you might call a jack of all trades. The house that my mother grew up in had belonged to my great-grandmother. So when Pap and my grandmother, Amanda, moved into the house, they needed extra rooms. Pap built 2 bedrooms upstairs, stairway up to 2 bedrooms. That was for the girls. He built a big open fireplace that faced the parlor, and the other side faced the dining room. That's where they would go at night in the wintertime, where they would sit and tell stories and get ready before bedtime. Pap also took the meal room, which was across the dog trot. You know what a dog trot is. Goes right down the middle of the house. You got rooms on each side. It's an open breezeway. So my great-grandmother Brooks, she had 2 rooms that had been built from the meal room. She had her bedroom, and she had her small kitchen, sitting room and kitchen. So the thing I wanted to show you first, and the reason I chose this is because I was prowling through one of my cabinets and I came across 2 things. Now, I can't get these close enough for you to see real good, but I'll try to describe them to you. This is what you call a mustache cup. I'm going to turn it a little to the side so the light will hit it, and you can see this bottom plate here. That covered the mustache when he was drinking his coffee. and just below it is the little opening where he sipped his coffee. This is a beautiful gold, green, and white mustache cup. Now this is probably the kind Pap had. I know. Hold till I catch the phone. I'll call you right back. Well, those things happen now. Where was I? This is also a shaving mug. This one has a picture of a clipper ship on it, 1850. This shaving mug was made in England, and I don't remember where I got it. But I want to show it to you. Now in the top, you can see a little cup. In that cup was soap. Soap looked just about like this. And in this pocket right here, right on the front, was the shaving brush. This is what, you wet the soap, wet the brush, and you got the soap very foamy, and you put on the face like this. This is the kind my dad used, and my daughter has the shaving mug. It's got a crack in it, and she also has his shaving brush. That he used that as long as I could remember. So I wanted you to see these two things. These are the kind of things my grandfather, and the mustache cup, you won't see very many of them around these days, but this one is such a beauty that I wanted to keep it. Now, I'm going to go way back. He was born in 1857. By the time he was 5 years old, the Civil War had started. And Pap was the little boy that on the farm that sat out on the big stone gate leading to the farm. The uncles and Pap and the brothers, they all worked the farm. And in the meantime, they had to be on the lookout for enemy soldiers, whether they were from the north or from the south. They came and they would vandalize and take anything of value, and sometimes they walked off with the farmhands as prisoners. So Pap, 5 years old, sat on top of the stone gate. He was on guard. He watched out over the field for enemy soldiers. And when he saw any action, any movement, he jumped down from that gate. He went running, yelling, "The soldiers are coming, the soldiers are coming." And the uncles and all the men rushed to the woodlands to hide until the soldiers left. Pap used to sit by the big open fire and tell the stories to his children. There were 13 children, and about 4 of them died in childbirth or as small children. In the wintertime, they sat by the open fire, and they'd be in their little flannel gowns and ready for bed, snow on the ground outside. And my grandmother, Amanda, would take little paper sack, little paper pokes, and she would put eggs in them, and she would place them in the coals of the fire, to bake the eggs. I'd never heard of baked eggs, but my mother told me about them. And she said sometimes the eggs would explode. And of course that caused a lot of excitement among the kids. And they also had hickory nuts, things like that. Those were their treats at night before they went to bed. But Pap always told them stories about the Civil War. He would tell them about their uncles and their great uncles. One great uncle was a pilot for the Union Army. And he would lead families from Virginia and Tennessee in through Cumberland Gap. The reason it's called Cumberland Gap is because mountains, and they came down, and you had a narrow gap that went through the mountains. And he would lead these families through the gap at night into the state of Kentucky, where they would go to other family members to live for safety. Now, there were stories like that Pap would tell. I wish I had been able to know him better, but one of the things I want to show you, and a cousin did this, and I'm just so grateful to her. She took Pap's day book. You're saying, what's a day book? Well, as a blacksmith, he was the only blacksmith in the community, so everybody came to him when they needed their horses shoed. You know what I'm talking about. The shoes had to either be repaired or they needed new shoes for the horses. And in his day book, this is it right here. This is my copy. It's got a lot of pages, and she Xeroxed those pages for all of her cousins to have a copy. And it says Day Book of William Floyd Rowlett. That was Pap. Each page has a name of his customers. I'll try to, this is a picture you can't see very well, but it's a Pap. He's sitting in a wicker, it looks like a wicker chair, wearing the hat that he always wore. And this is the only picture I have of him. But also, listed in the front of the book are all of his customers that they all charged the goods. And it was what you might call, instead of being paid in cash, it was like a bartering system. When the customer needed merchandise or food from the general store, they might bring in 2 or 3 bushels of apples, and Pap would trade the goods for the apples. And I don't understand his bookkeeping very well, but the print is rather hard to read, but it got that old English sling to it, which I love. And the main thing Pap worked on were shoes for the horses, a nickel each. He would repair wagon wheels, and building a new wagon wheel was the most expensive thing that he sold. And in his day book, it shows where he charged $8 to build a new wagon wheel. Now, we don't have any idea what was involved in making wagon wheels back in those days. You've seen the Pioneer wagons in all of these movies, those great big wheels that they have. When those wheels broke down, you were stranded. You either had to build a new one or you had to get on a wagon with someone else, because it took too long to repair a wagon wheel. So that was his biggest product. He sharpened plows. He, anything that had metal to it that a blacksmith could repair or build, that's what he did. His grist mill, he was often giving neighbors flour meal, who were not as well equipped and didn't, well, let's just say they were the poor families. The general store, my mother said he would let the girls come and work in the general store, and he would let them charge things. Now, what they charged would be lace to trim their dresses, or pillowcases. They would get embroidery thread so that they could do their needlework. They might get ribbons. They loved ribbons. They loved to get the ribbons at Christmas time. So when they charged things, they had their own page in his grocery ledger. I also have his original grocery ledger. I tried to find it tonight, but as usual, I put it in a safe place so that I can't find it either. But I ran across pages that had my mother's name and her sister's names, and it would list the things that they had charged. But they had to pay for those things. They weren't given to them. They had to do so many things in housework, with laundry, cleaning the house, I don't remember, plucking the geese for the feathers, for feather bed. That's the sort of things that they did to earn the money to pay for their little trinkets and their notions that they used for the pretty things. I don't know exactly where to go from here, but that gives you a general idea of who my grandfather was. Now, all I can say about my grandmother is, this is hard to tell. My Aunt Rennie and my mother both, one night were sitting in our sitting room, and they were talking about their mother, the lady I never knew. They both said if there was only one angel in heaven, it would be my grandmother. They talked about her like she was an angel, and I believe to them she was. So I don't know much about her except she was a very hard working woman. She was a gentle lady, and she loved her girls. So I thought I'd give you a start on my family history. That's a little bit of it. I put this old quilt across the back of my couch. I've kept on folded up in those big plastic bags, and I said, you know, it's just a waste to have them wrapped up in a big plastic bag and shoved in the back of a closet. I need to get them out. I need to air them out. I can remember when Mama used to take her quilts and feather bed, and she'd take them out to the clothesline, and she'd air them out on bright sunny days, and they just smelled so good when she brought them back in to the house. So this is an old quilt. It's not a family quilt. It's one I picked up somewhere about 40 years ago, and I've got 3 or 4 more. I gave away several quilts because I just didn't need them, and I saw no reason to store them. I've got what's called a blanket chest. In the old days, it was called a sugar chest. Mine is a cherry blanket chest, so I've got my quilt and the favorable things that I wanted to keep in that chest. And when I got this quilt out, it was also folded up with another quilt, so it's lying on the couch there. Along with those things, of course, you've seen my mother's milk pitcher. This I adore. This is 100, let's see, it's 101 years old. This, I've got a collection of these in different sizes, but they were the old milk and water pitchers. I just think they're beautiful. Now, these had no family connection, but it was Yellowware that I was collecting at one time when I could afford it. It was expensive. This is one pattern, one of my favorite little pieces. Can you see the pink and blue lines around it? This was always my favorite one because, in fact, it still got the price tag on the bottom that I paid $6 for it. And I'm saying that's 35 to 40 years ago that I bought that one. Here's another one, same style, pink and blue rim. Can you see them? I hope you can. Get them over here where that light hits it a little better. Yeah, anyway, so I just want you to see these pretty things. These are the things I love. Here's just a plain Yellowware. And of course, sitting down in that is my corn pattern, the Shawnee, made in the USA. This is the only piece I have of the Shawnee pattern. It too was something I wanted to collect, but I couldn't afford it. This is a beautiful Yellowware dish or bowl. If you can see the light green around the edge, it's a soft green and it is so pretty. I would love to have the whole set. There's more. The next one is like this one. You see? One, they just sit down as a set. Another one, 1, 2, 3. Put this down in here. Put the next one down in there. And these two I'll put in there also, so you can see how I'm attacking them. Here's one, a little larger, and I'm sure my mother, I can see my mother now with her egg beater. This has got a lip on it, and she would hold her bowl like this, and she would take that egg beater, have her egg whites in there, and she would beat. She would beat and she would beat. And I would watch her, and I would just get tired watching her, and I thought, her arm's gonna fall off. But that's how she beat her egg white, was in a bowl like this. And she turned it sideways until she got her meringue built. Now here's a beauty that some of you probably have not seen. Take a look at this. This is big and it is heavy. Got this a few months ago at an estate sale. In fact, there were 2 of them, just alike, except the other one is bigger than this one. I could hardly lift it. It was so big. But it's such a beauty and such a rare thing. I'm gonna see what it says. It says Weller. I'm not familiar with that name. And I don't know how old the bowl is, but I do know it's old. Because the lady who owned it would probably be 120 years old today, at least. Now, that's just some of my things. You're gonna end up seeing everything except my underwear before I get through. Little by little, I'm showing you the things I love. And every now and then I get to thinking, what am I going to do with this? I just look at it and enjoy it. Every now and then I get to use it. So these are the things I do in my old age. But I don't let myself feel old. That's what my dentist today said. He's a young student at the University of Kentucky Dental College. That's where I go to get my dental work done. And they do such good work. And those students are the most pleasant young people I have ever met. The one that is attending me now had to feel a front tooth right in front today because I was having a little pain with it and couldn't figure out where that pain was coming from. And he says there's a tiny decay there, so he fixed it. He was so gentle and so kind, and I said if he would stay in Lexington, he'd be my dentist from now on. But he's from North Carolina, and I think he's gonna go back home and do his dental practice there. So after I got home and I took a good nap, and I got to thinking, I don't know how often I should do a video because I want to keep the attention of the viewers and subscribers I already have. I don't want to lose their interest. So you can tell me how often you like to watch my videos, and what you like to talk about. What would you like to hear? I can tell you a lot of family history and some funny stories. I'm holding off on the funny stories a little bit till you get to know me. You get to know the kind of person I am, and I do have a sense of humor. There's no doubt about it. Look at this shirt I've got on. This is what I wore to the dentist today. It's just about as slouchy as you can get. But look what's on the side here. I got my Eiffel Tower. That makes people think I've been to Paris, France. But you know, you can buy these at Dillard's and places like that. You don't have to go to Paris to wear a Paris, France shirt. So I kept my shirt on. I love this shirt because, well, maybe someday I might get to go to Paris, France. I don't know how that's going to happen at this age, but it's something to dream about. And I like telling my stories. I like keeping up with the history. I want the young people today to know who their grandparents were, who their great-grandparents were, and the kind of life they led. Every life was important. Every life was interesting. And I want to end with this little story. I went to a family reunion once, and my cousin Agnes was there. Agnes was the daughter of my Uncle Carly. Carly was the one that helped Pap in the general store. So while we were talking, she was telling me where they lived when she was growing up. Well, when you go to Cumberland Gap or Lee County, Virginia, or Middlesboro, those three states join right there just before you get to Cumberland Gap. Today, they're 4-lane highways. Back when she was young, going to school, they were dirt roads. And their house sat right on the spot where the three states connected, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Virginia. Well, she caught my attention immediately, and she said, well, we would eat breakfast in Kentucky, we would sleep in Tennessee, and then we'd sit in the parlor by the fireplace in Virginia. I never forgot what she said, and each time I get to travel that way, which is not very often, when we reach the border of those 3 states, that the first thing that comes to my mind is my Uncle Carly lived in 3 states at one time. So I thought you'd appreciate that little story. And I'm going to let you go now. And I'm not going to use my clicker because I discovered it's not going to work. But I'll give it a try anyway. No, it's not going to work. You get to look at my face up close. And I'm not saying that's the delight of the day. If you're ready, whoo, that's it for today. And let me know what you think of my story. And if you like my history, I'll be glad to tell you whatever I can. And I hope you enjoy it too. And you do the same thing for your children and your grandchildren. Let them know who you are, where you came from, and what they can expect to be in the future. Thank you so much.